Having a daily gratitude practice was one of the most transformative things that I've done in my self development and self awareness journey. So much so that the first video on my channel actually talks about how I used gratitude to create more money and happiness while I was struggling in grad school. But lately, I've been seeing this trend online of people kind of trying to debunk gratitude practices and equating gratitude practices with spiritual bypassing or, spiritual gaslighting. And spiritual bypassing would be this tendency of denying difficult human emotions, like denying your sadness, your anger, your feeling of envy, whatever that is, and kind of trying to rise above. Again, gaslighting yourself in order to not deal with these difficult emotions, which is not what a gratitude, an intentional gratitude practice is about, at least not if you do it right. So today I want to talk about how you can use a gratitude practice to transform your mind and transform your life without gaslighting yourself. So let's get to the video. The first thing that I would like to start talking about is what is spiritual bypassing. And I think that this is important, even though I kind of gave a little definition at the beginning. But often on the internet, it's very common that people will talk about these terms and talk about things without actually researching and understanding a little bit deeper. So I want to shed a little bit of light on this term and how it was first coined. So this term was first created by John Wellwood. John was a psychotherapist and a Buddhist, and he coined his term like a few decades ago. I'm going to link one of his articles down below, and I'm also going to read a passage so you can understand exactly what the spiritual bypassing is. Spiritual bypassing is a term I coined to describe a process I saw happening in the Buddhist community I was in, and also in myself. Although most of us were sincerely trying to work on ourselves, I noticed a widespread tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. When we are spiritually bypassing, we often use the goal of awakening or liberation to rationalize what I call premature transcendence, trying to rise above the raw and messy side of our humanness before we have fully faced and made peace with it. This is actually a beautiful article. Again, if you are on your self-development and spiritual path, I highly recommend that you read it. And I brought his words here today because it makes a ton of difference when you understand how and when and why the term was first created. So if you know anything about Buddhism at all, you know that spiritual bypassing can be a thing. It doesn't have to be, but it can be, which doesn't mean that it can only happen in the Buddhist community, but it helps to understand, the context in which the term was created. And like the human experience can be a difficult experience. We all know that. We don't want to, have this split between our human selves and our spiritual selves, because I believe one of the beautiful things about the human experience is that we are both. We are spirit and we are human. So you don't want to deny those things. However, being grateful does not mean that you have to spiritual bypass yourself or others. It doesn't have to be like that. Even with the messiness and how difficult the human experience can be, we can still have a gratitude practice and having that help transform ourselves and our lives. And here is where we need to be able to hold a little bit of ambiguity or to have a little more complex conversations, because not everything in life is like black and white. Why is it important to, even with, the difficulty of the human life and the fact that we need to recognize our emotions, and we don't want to gaslight ourselves, why is it still important to be intentionally grateful? The first thing that we need to understand is that the quality of our minds greatly dictates the quality of our lives, right? Like you can have two people living the very same situation and circumstances, but they're going to have different experiences depending on what's going on in their internal world. And what happens also is that our brains evolved to be biased toward the negative. And that was just because of evolutionary reasons. Like our ancestors survived because they were able to look at their environment and predict danger and threat. So we were able to survive because we could predict or be aware of how our environment was threatening us and how to protect ourselves. And this was amazing for evolution. But nowadays, this is not so great because that means that your brain, your mind is going to be looking for the negative more often than the positive. You can have 20 things happening to you in one day. 18 were good, 2 were bad. Your mind is going to focus on the 2 bad ones. That's just how we roll. That's just how we function as human beings. So in any day, if you do not have some sort of practice to tame your mind in a way in order to start perceiving the good and the beauty, you're going to be perceiving the bad things more often than the good things. And this is going to greatly impact the quality of your life. Because again, the quality of your life is greatly dictated by the quality of your mind. It doesn't mean that we're going to be controlling our thinking all the time, but we can redirect the way that we think and the way that we perceive, maybe even once a day when we have our meditation practice, our gratitude practice, anything that you do in order to establish a relationship with your inner world. And this also reminds me of the concept of entropy. Entropy has many definitions, but the main one comes from thermodynamics. And it can basically be defined as the disorderliness of a system. And there is a law of nature that states that entropy increases over time in a closed system or in the universe. So if you see yourself as a closed system, or yourself, your mind, your body, or even if you see yourself as part of this closed system, which is the universe, you know that things in your life, in your mind, in your emotions will tend to disorder if you don't step up to organize things a little bit. So having a practice to observe, clean, organize what's happening in your internal world will greatly increase the order and the perceived beauty in your life. And this is amazing. We definitely want that. How can we hold ambiguity here though? How can we understand that life can be messy and we don't want to deny that and gaslight ourselves, but also understand and have a gratitude practice or any other practice because you understand that you need to step up to organize your mind and your perception a little bit more in order to have more beauty and order in your life. Let's say that you are Maria or John and you just learned that your mind will tend to disorder if you don't step up to organize things a little bit, and that your brain is also, biased toward the negative. So you will be perceiving difficult things in your life more often and you want to change that. So you decided that you're going to be grateful every day for, 5 things that happen to you, or that you're going to do like a gratitude meditation. However, life is messy and difficult, and today you also had the worst fight with your loved one. How do you do it? What do you do at the end of the day? So I'm going to share with you what I do, and maybe these will, give you some ideas. The first thing that it's important to do is to recognize whatever feeling or, whatever thinking pattern is bothering you. So this is step 1. The thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to your bedroom, your bathroom, your car, whatever place that you can be alone. You're going to and you're gonna allow yourself to express and vent whatever happened to you in that day. In that case, the fight. So you can journal, you can talk out loud, you can record voice memos to yourself. This is something that I've been doing a lot lately. You can do a tapping meditation. This is also one of my favorite practices. For me, I like telling the story of what happened while I tap on my body with those specific points. I'm connected to the EFT tapping practice. And this is really helpful because I get the chance to recognize my emotions and also helping my body release the emotions once the emotions were fully expressed. So you're going to spend some time with yourself doing something to recognize what happened. And this is extremely important because when you do that, the emotions that you are feeling stop clouding your mind. And when that happens, you have more clarity. So maybe you realize that honestly, that fight was over nothing and that your loved one just caught you in a bad day and that you need to apologize. Maybe you realize that, well, actually, you have been feeling unfulfilled for quite some time and that you're going to have a difficult conversation with your partner. Or maybe you can even realize that this relationship has very little room for improvement and that you need to end things, right away. When you express your feelings, your emotions stop clouding your mind and you can have a greater understanding of what's going on. So this is amazing. You always want to be able to recognize what you're feeling. Now, your heart calmed down, you're feeling a little bit better. Can you still be grateful? My answer to you is yes, absolutely. Like your day had 24 hours. Something good happened. Something good happened. Maybe your lunch was really good. Maybe you had a nice conversation with your friend. Maybe you're grateful that you have running water, electricity, and internet. I don't know. Like you can be grateful for small or big things. It doesn't really matter. The point is, you need to be grateful for the things that you're actually grateful for. This is the main point. I'm not asking you to be grateful for the fight. And this is something that this is probably the most important part of this conversation. You can be grateful for difficult things, but most of the time, you can only be grateful in hindsight. Most of the times, like you cannot be grateful after the fact. You don't have to force yourself to be grateful after the fact. So maybe, I don't know, 2 years has passed, you ended that relationship, you met the love of your life, you're married and you're super happy. And then looking back, you look at the day in which you had that terrible fight with your ex-girlfriend or boyfriend, and you're grateful because you realize that was the fight that made me realize that I was in a really terrible relationship. So maybe you will be grateful for it in the future, maybe you won't. The point is not to force yourself to be grateful for things that are difficult, because then you're going to be gaslighting yourself. And that's not what you want to do. Like, recognize the emotions. And when it's time to write down the things that you're grateful for, think about the things that you're actually grateful for. Like, how easy is that? And I think this is so transformative and amazing because that's when we zoom out and we see, again, because our mind is very biased toward the negative, when you have that intentional practice, you see that there's just so much more happening in your life. That it's not all about the fight or whatever problem that you're having. Like, there are beautiful things. There is order. There is things that you can be grateful for. And this is amazing because it even becomes easier to solve the problems that you have because you understand, you know what? This is not as big as I thought it was. Like, this is something that it can be solved. Like, you become a little bit more chill, a little bit more proactive even, because you're not consumed by those feelings and by whatever it is that it's happening. I hope that's clear. And if you're interested in knowing more self-development tools, things that can help you in your self-development journey, I actually have a video about my 5 favorite self-development and self-awareness tools that I'm gonna leave linked at the end of this video. And if you're interested in gratitude practices, I actually have a few gratitude meditations that I uploaded on my channel. So I'm going to leave that linked at the end as well. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, you can be grateful without gaslighting yourself. I'll see you in the next one.